Over the last couple weeks, I've been messing around with some C# and some C++ and some libraries for both of them. For C++, I was messing around with a framework called SFML, and for C#, I've been messing around with the XNA framework that you can see here. I started out with the SFML over here, and as you can see, there's not a whole lot going here. It's a pretty basic game, and I decided to port it over to the XNA framework, and I wanted to see how well it transferred over and apply some of the newer skills / abilities of the XNA towards the game programming. And I'm going to bring this over here a little bit. Now, I will admit that XNA has some shortcomings, but it also has some very easy and understandable idioms, such as the sprite batch and how they deal with events and the drawing of the frames. They have a lot of this code already made. They make you the constructor, they have an initialize, they have a load content, they provide you an unload content, an update method for any of your keyboard, mice input, gamepad. Since it is XNA, you can put stuff on the Xbox 360 and the Windows Phone, and then they have a draw method here as well that's just for graphic stuff. And as you can see there's some key state stuff here where I see if there's an escape pressed down, it'll exit. Left, right, up, down will move the player. Left, right, up, and down. And it's not too complicated here. At the load content, we have a sprite batch that we use later on, and we can load in our, in this case, a player ship and an enemy ship, and it's just a simple content load texture 2D, which basically means a sprite, and then you type in the name of the texture you want to bring in on the load. You can see those textures or any of the other assets over here on the left, where it's enemy ship and ship PNG. Now XNA will not even work if you try and put PNG or JPEG or any of the extensions. You need to put in the name of the asset, and you can figure out that by right-clicking on it and go properties, and it tells you right there. Most of the time when you import it or whatever, it just ships the asset name as whatever the file name, so it's pretty easy. On to the C++ version. This is with SFML. Give you kind of a little bit of overview of this, set up some game variables. Now, I did have to go and make pretty much every single thing here. You know, I had to make up these loading things, which I kind of brought from the XNA into the C++, or at least just, you know, kind of how they did it, just to make it go faster. Reduce that boilerplate. And anyway, you can see that some operator overloading, game variables being set here, render window, set up the render window, width, height, BPP, title, all that stuff's right there. Set up the input for the game, that's keyboard. I believe it's a mouse input as well. It's kind of a one big input thingy. So set up new content, load in the ship, the enemy ship. On the enemy ship, I do have to put on a color mask. I did have to go over here and edit the enemy ship, and I just made it so it's the enemy ship itself. So if I bring that up, you can see that it's just that ship by itself, while in the C++ version there is, there we bring it up, there we go, you can see that there's some other stuff here. So basically that just crops out that image and then does a color mask on that gray color. So I didn't have to do that, but I did, messing around with it. Turn the images into sprites, which doesn't make any sense to me. Why are you going to load an image and then turn it into a sprite if you're going to turn it into a sprite in the first place? Anyway, you set the positions, and then here's, like I said, where I select the square part of that other texture with the other weapons and the 3 other ships on it. And then when I run this, I actually have to scale that one up 2 times. And then you get into the main game loop, set the frame limit at 100. You don't have to do that. Show the mouse cursor. I don't remember if you have to do that either, but I did. Now that SFML has a couple quirky things. If you try and run it without this event type equals event closed, game.closed, if you try and click on the red X in a normal application, it will not close, so you have to have that. It's just something weird. And then here, this is if the escape key is pressed, then it will close. Simple. Set up a float for the elapsed time, get the time, do the move. Now, one other key thing here is with SFML, you have to do frame rate independent moving. With the XNA, I don't have to do that. They call this update method a certain amount of times per second, and whether you have 5 frames per second or 100, it's going to call that a certain amount of times. I think it's 60. There might be an option to set that somewhere that I didn't get to, but I read online that you can do that. And then pretty much the same thing. Clear the window with gray, draw the 2 sprites, display, return 0 when it's done. That covers the 2 in that regard. On to the amount of code and running the programs and getting how much they use for resources. The SFML C++ version of this has 105 lines. I do have some white space that I could delete if I wanted to, but then the readability would go in the toilet. But as it stands, it is very readable, or at least to me it's very readable. It could stand to use some cleaning up around in here where that gets a little complicated, but the rest of it's pretty simple. As for XNA, it's pretty lean as well. All the includes, all the declarations up here, this is all pretty nicely spaced out. I could probably get rid of the brackets here, but whatever. 94 lines of code for the main game program.